When I cover a series that isn't as popular in the West, I normally talk about Shonen Jump titles, which I've covered both on my channel already, both being The Gray Man and Katekyo Hitman Reborn. However, what I'm about to cover right now isn't something my audience may be expecting, as it is a series that is based on a light novel. It's not from a manga or an anime original, but rather a light novel with the same name, Toaru Majutsu no Index, or known in English as A Certain Magical Index. Its reputation and popularity is a lot like the previous ones I've talked about. It's not that familiar in the West, unfortunately, but it still manages to be a very successful title in Japan, as it is recently reported that its light novel, manga, and including other its spin-off series sold about 31 million copies. Despite the anime adaptation having divisive responses, it's still a successful franchise overall. So technically this doesn't belong in the quote-unquote hidden gem category, but I'm still going to talk about it anyway because it is a series that is near and dear to my heart. Yes, I mainly am a Hitman Reborn channel, for the most part, but at the end of the day, I also want to cover series that not only I have extensive knowledge and experience with, but also medias that are genuinely important to me for so long. And Toaru Majutsu Index is one of them. And to be honest, that was also one of my goals for this channel as well, now that I think about it. Hopefully this video will at least captivate your attention and maybe give the series another chance or try. If you already are a Toaru fan like I am, just in case you came here to celebrate his 20th birthday, then I'm glad you're here. Now, let me set the scene first. I've actually gotten into Toaru in the middle of 2014, basically 10 years from today. I did watch the anime and interacted with a lot of the fandom. We used to talk about the recent episodes we've watched and our favorite characters. It was my first time being introduced with the series overall, and I was confused about Index and Railgun, wondering what were the significance with each other until I found out that Index is the real story and Railgun was an exclusive spin-off. But it still is something that people should get into anyway because it is essentially a Toaru series regardless. I also found out that the Index anime is adaptation of a light novel and not a manga. We discussed things about how Toma and Index were a lot more polished as characters in the light novel than the anime, how Style Magnus basically losing in every fight he's in, Frenda splitting in half jokes and puns, of course. Kuroko is actually a cool character if she was next to Mikoto all the time. There's also other fan favorite characters that I remembered like Othinus, Kamisato, Fiamma of the Right, Sugita, and etc. Oh, and of course the goat himself, Accelerator. I mean, come on, right? There's also the PSP game, which I remembered my older brother and I playing together at one point. I played it through night and day for as much as I could. It was immensely addicting, as it is a memory that has solidified my love for the Toaru franchise. It was something very special to me, whether as an anime fan, light novel reader, or just genuinely someone who consumes media in general. Before I talk about what Toaru is all about, I would like to note a few disclaimers here first. This might come as a surprise, but despite my experience with the series for 10 years, my knowledge isn't as powerful as majority of the fandom. Specifically the ones who are the actual experts who studied the series longer than me. I still have a lot to learn because in all honesty, I'm not the most hardcore expertise Toaru fan, and my knowledge is somewhat rusty. But I will still do the very best of my ability to explain things. And it never stopped me from making this video because I remember being in love with the series overall, which I still do. And I want to celebrate his 20th birthday and talk about what I love about Toaru and why you need to give it a try in case you're new to the series. Without further ado, let's dive in. By the way, I forgot to say this before recording. My pronunciation is completely garbage. Okay, I'm not necessarily going through every basic details of the story because at the end of the day, this is something people need to give it a try themselves. I'm only making this video so that I can promote more about the series and let people talk about it, engaging in conversation. The world of Toaru is what the title of this video basically suggests. It's a world where magic and science coexist together. However, in the beginning of the story, the setting takes place in Academy City. It's a home to the science side where people with superpower psychic abilities are called espers, and they come with 5 different tier levels. Level 0, Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, 4, and finally Level 5, which are irrefutably the strongest espers around. Among the Level 0 espers is Toma Kamijo. Toma suffers from immense bad luck, and you might think it's due to the plot convenience, but it actually comes from the power that resides in his right hand, the Imagine Breaker. Imagine Breaker basically does more than just bring bad luck, as it's also an ability that cancels out a person's power that is essentially unnatural, with literally just a single touch. This includes the laws of science, illusions, magic, and etc. One day he comes across a girl in his balcony named Index, I'm not gonna say her full name, who basically taught him the ways of magic and reveals herself to be a magician nun from an Anglican church, or known mostly as Church of England. Yeah, Church of England. Eventually, two mysterious magicians from England were then sent to Tokyo, being Academy City, and to hunt down Index due to her having the quote-unquote perfect memory, as is revealed that she has about 103,000 magical grimoires. To eliminate Index, they have to erase her memories entirely, as it might overload to an absurd level. After a few moments later, Toma ends up protecting Index from the two magicians, their names being Style Magnus and Kaori Kanzaki. Due to them having magical powers, it wasn't difficult for Toma's right hand to act up in the process. This does lead to a lot of cool fights, especially if you watch the anime, but in comparison to the light novel, it does a much better job of explaining his abilities in the stories that he's involved in. After Index got allegedly injured, Toma and his teacher wanted to aid Index and her wounds. Unfortunately, Toma's right hand accidentally destroyed some kind of magical seal that's planted in her mouth and activated her unknown magical god form. It's then confirmed that regarding the true nature of Index's memory that needed to be erased is nothing more than a fluke, as the church not only planned to make more grimoires harder to access, but because of their fear of Index betraying them, it ends up becoming a magic god. Due to Kanzaki and Style's good formal ties with Index in the past, as revealed by Kanzaki previously, they ended up helping Toma to stop Index. In the process, Toma ends up getting his memory wiped out as an exchange rather than the place of Index. Aleister Crowley, the co-head director of Academy City, was responsible for sending magicians after Index. And so after Kaori and Style discovered the truth, that didn't stop Aleister from sending new magicians after Toma and Index. With the incident that brought them together, Toma is now intertwined in the magic side affairs, as well with the science side troubles that he's surrounded by, due to whatever the Imagine Breaker sends him at. Due to its nature, incidents on both sides occur, and Toma just so happens to be in the middle of all these incidents, which can be anything. With the one thing in mind, having to protect others, which led to a lot of character introductions that you'll meet along the way, with cool dynamics that you look forward to. It can either be a fun chemistry, hilarious connections and moments, and of course a showdown rivalry. And the rest of the crazy adventurous stories unfold. Kamachi has a unique talent that takes small elements and tropes and develops them into something unimaginable, which is something you may notice the more you get into the series. The depiction and portrayal of Index's story arcs are usually heavily magic focused, but other times they can also be heavily science focused. Some that are a bit of both, and later on some that focuses on conflict between magic side and the science side. There's plenty of story arcs with each of them feels episodic, as there's a lot of stories to go through. Hell, I would be here all day long summarizing each of the story arcs, such as Kazakiri Hyoka arc, Angel Fall arc, Remnant arc, Invasion arc, and personally one of my favorites arc being World War III arc. Pretty sure what I told so far should be enough for you to get the idea of what the story of Toaru is all about, and what you should be expecting. Plus, keep in mind, this video is for you to give the series a try. I'm not just making this video by telling you how you should see Toaru and how it works. I'm here to retell my experience as a longtime fan, giving you significant knowledge you may need, while at the same time giving my opinions on the get-go. Alright? Okay, the best part about Toaru series is that it develops Toma as a character, but it does the same with the characters you may be introduced to. The story is one of the best parts for me in Index, as though it may seem like a typical convenience-driven story where Toma is basically forced into situations, but don't let that fool you, because although Toma is the main protagonist, he doesn't necessarily overshadow everyone. Far from it, actually. And let me explain why in the character section parts. One of my favorite tropes about either a story-based manga, anime, or video game is where, despite having a definitive protagonist or a fan-favorite side character, it doesn't shy away from giving every character the respective spotlight, while at the same time not overshadowing its main protagonist, whether it's a villain, side character, antagonist, semi-antagonist, anti-hero characters, so on and so forth. Usually on the latter, there's a single character that's considered a fan-favorite among many, whether it's a villain, hero, side character, and even sometimes the protagonist, and as a result, the writer gives them a huge focus to the point that they basically overshadow literally the whole cast. Now this one has its positives and negatives. I'm not saying this is a bad thing because I know people don't mind this trope, but ultimately in my opinion it kind of ruins the whole point of character development of the rest of the cast, just because a single character or even more than one happens to be the most popular. Toaru has a lot of fan favorite characters, but it's never to a point that they overshadow everyone in terms of story specifically. Everyone can feel like a main character as they can be fleshed out in their respective spotlight, where we get to know them better. Everyone has their own redemption. Even some of the characters that the average Toaru fan wouldn't recognize much can actually become a favorite to anyone. Even if it's someone we don't really know too much about, that's yet to have any information, can still be beloved by fans. Like Index, for example. Index is a mixed character to say the least. She has gotten a lot of bad reputation among the fans due to how the anime portrays her, but she was much more polished and better written in the light novel, which is mostly well received by the novel readers. Mostly same can be said with other characters like Kaori, Style, and Kamijo Toma. I'm going to be honest, the anime has a special place in my heart. Not only is it due to nostalgia, but it's the reason why it got me into the Toaru series, like many others. While I admit that the Toaru anime has its moments, the light novel is the definitive way to actually get into Toaru. But that's not to say you shouldn't watch the anime either. Granted, you can still watch the anime and find enjoyment out of it, or if you want, you can just read the manga, which is based on a light novel in the manga form, which I'll talk about that on later. Note that I will not be covering every important detail of the three main star characters. It is necessary, but the point for you is to be interested in them. Hence why I will at least put up significant points on each of their traits to prove how likable they are, pointing out their strengths and weaknesses. The first star is Misaka Mikoto, also known as Toki Wadai Ace. She's a unique character within the Toaru franchise who might people consider to be iconic of the Toaru. Despite appearing mostly as a somewhat major character in Index series, she is among the main heroines who has her own spin-off, where she becomes the main focus along with her roommate Shirai Kuroko, who was originally a minor character in Index. The spin-off series is called Toaru Kakaku no Railgun, or in English, a certain scientific railgun. However, I'll only briefly talk about her character in Index since that's where she first debuted. The way she's portrayed according to Kamachi is made to represent a typical strong-headed girl. As a level 5 Esper, the kind you'd expect for someone who doesn't get well with the level 0 Espers who are underneath her, the example being Toma himself. Now don't let this fool you, because Mikoto does evolve eventually, progressing more as a character and gets more fleshed out development the more you get into it, shown perfectly in Volume 3 of Index. She started off as a stubborn, egotistical level 5 to someone who eventually realizes that it's not wrong to rely on others, realizing her own faults, mistakes, and flaws, which melts away any negativity she used to have and carry. She's even willing to protect Toma and the one she's shown to care about. This moment is very crucial in her own role in the Sisters arc. It's where her perspective truly changes due to how Toma being involved in her life, and saving her and her sisters, clones, from Accelerator. Now on her weakness side, unfortunately, even though she is a major character, main heroine, she appeared very little in the Index series, mainly because there's a lot of characters that have their own focused arc, shown notably in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. There are a few moments here and there for her around, but she's still a likable character regardless. Her role is much stronger in Railgun, however, which I do think is more recommended if you're interested in the character itself, as I know many people, including non-fans, who at least knows her, or at least are familiar with the character herself. She may be seen as someone who is just a tsundere gimmick and nothing else, but she's in my opinion far more complex as a character. And although I do believe she's a bit too popular in the Toaru franchise, I for one believe there's a perfectly good reason for that. You have to keep in mind because this is an element that I would focus on when I get to Toma Kamijo. The second star is arguably one of my favorite characters in the whole series, Accelerator, who I just mentioned. He also has his own spin-off with the same name, Toaru no Accelerata, or in English, a certain scientific accelerator. While Misaka Makoto represents the rocky but good side of Academy City, the home of science, Accelerator is the exact opposite of the spectrum, being one of the dark side. Or at least, that's what we're led to believe at first. Accelerator has one of the strongest character introductions in the series overall, having a crucial appearance in Volume 3 as an overpowered level 5 Esper with his battle with Misaka and his sisters and Toma. From how Kamachi portrayed him in the first few volumes, he is your typical full-fledged villain, as unlike Toma, who seeks to save countless of lives, Accelerator seeks to destroy literally everyone, shown with the way he killed thousands of Misaka clones for his malicious entertainment, wanting to find new ways of getting stronger like most level 5 Espers would do. In Accelerator's backstory, we get to know more about him, which I'll briefly talk about, and in my opinion, it's honestly well written. Basically, he's an orphan. He has no parents, no friends, and no one that will miss him. He can't make friends because he's unable to control his vector powers, and hence why he became part of the project that violates human rights. After losing to Toma, suffering from his downfall, he finally recognizes his actions and actually felt remorse for the first time in a while since a child, before getting horribly experimented on. Toma became a huge influence for Accelerator and realized that he is the most person he strived to be like. Someone who wants to have a normal life and save people, until he realizes that his sins cannot be forgiven. That wishful thinking is impossible to do. He knows he can't be a hero like Toma, so he's in denial about his heroic deeds in a sense. It's an interesting contrast to Toma in my opinion, who doesn't really have any set guiding philosophy beyond I'll save you whether you like it or not, and does whatever he wants without having to categorize people into good or evil. Accelerator exploits the idea about what it's like to have a person who, although seeks a similar goal to the main character with heroic deeds, he feels that he is unable to view himself as such due to his pastful sins. Now onto his weakness. Much similar to most characters in the franchise, he wasn't portrayed correctly in the anime, unlike in the light novel or the manga. Plus, similar to Mikoto, he has his own spin-off, where he's the main focus. Despite this, however, he is one of my favorite characters in the franchise, and it makes sense why he is often praised among the fandom. I'm sure most newcomers will actually like the character, whether it's from his vector powers, personality, character, and well, his evil laugh. Finally, let's go for the main star, being the protagonist, Toma Kamijo. Toma is your average everyman. He doesn't really have much skills on his own and just so happens to be an Esper, which is explained in his backstory in the light novel of Index. In the anime, he's portrayed as your typical one-dimensional character. He's bland, doesn't develop much as a character, and although has a personality that grew on me in a way, he's not someone that the average viewer would want as a protagonist. Yeah, I didn't like Toma either, and it's honestly reasonable why majority of the fandom thought so at first. In the light novel, however, he was obviously a much more profound character with the way Kamachi wrote him. The one thing that Misaka and Accelerator have in common is the fact that they were both level 5s who are heavily impacted by Toma Kamijo. A level 0 Esper hence brings me to the complex character part. What makes the conflict between the magic side and the science side interesting is that other than having their unique way of drawing power, both have corrupted individuals in their places of power who have less heroic intentions. But that doesn't mean necessarily that each faction are inherently terrible people. Kamachi wanted to make a point that both factions have their twisted side, but it's up to the individuals themselves whether they want to change for the better. There can be good people who can feel remorse, then there's the ones who would likely never change. In Toaru, there is no black and white. It's similar to the real world, where it's up to us as humans to live and think for ourselves. Can we have a change of heart? Are we willing to express guilt over our terrible deeds? How are we going to bargain over it? Toma Kamijo is the impediment in the middle of both sides. While he is an Esper who lives in Academy City, Imagine Breaker is neither science side or the magic side. This might be a bit too convenient for the casual viewers. This is meant to make Toma more flexible for the sake of character development. As I've mentioned, we see how Toma changes these people as he's the one in the middle, carrying with him the immense burden of fighting people and protecting the ones he openly cares about. Even with his so-called bad luck, he's still willing to go this far to save people. Even to a point where he ends up being glad that he has these kinds of powers so that he can save people, being involved in these situations. That's a good character arc. Arguably one of his biggest moments is in Volume 9 of New Testament, where Toma makes the famous "It bothers me" speech, which goes more deeper about how much Toma suffers each time he protects people, going through a lot of depth of his nightmares, seeing what does people see in Toma that no one sees in himself as a person. All in all, it keeps us interested to learn more about our beloved protagonist and see what he goes through in the world he lives in, and the story that goes from wild to mundane to insanity level. He might not be to your liking at first, but I am assured you'll have more enjoyment the more you read. One of the reasons why I think Toaru is generally hard to recommend mostly has to do with the idea of getting into it. Even if you are invested and interested in the Toaru franchise, you still have a hard time figuring out which one is the best way to invest yourself in the story, and even then, you'd want to know how to truly get in it with an order. This is, I believe, one of the biggest problems for newcomers, which is why Toaru to me is sometimes hard to recommend. However, I will do my best to form a suggestion in a way that's less complicated for you to try out. This was covered already in another channel, one of the biggest Toaru channels of all time, being Eon. So let me try to make this more fair to the average viewer to form 3 consecutive choices along with my opinion. Number 1, arguably the best choice that I can honestly say for you is to read the Toaru light novels, easily. I think a lot of fans can agree, especially because if you want to invest yourself into a well-written story with beloved characters at their peak, the light novel is a much better way to really get into Toaru as a whole, which I will link in the description below. All you have to do is read the first volume and then read the rest afterwards. If you're not a light novel reader, then rest assured, I have another option. Number 2. If you decided to pick the anime, despite no guarantee that you'll find enjoyment out of it, then you may have to watch them in order, which is fairly simple. You just have to watch them as which one came out first in the released order. And yes, you also have to include the spin-offs. So this goes from Toaru no Index Season 1, Toaru no Railgun Season 1, Toaru no Index Season 2, Toaru Index the Movie, Miracle of Indion, which is optional, Toaru no Railgun S, which is basically Railgun Season 2, Toaru no Index Season 3, Toaru no Accelerator, and Toaru no Railgun T, which is Toaru Railgun Season 3. Ultimately, however, the decision is yours. But if you want to watch the anime in a proper order, this is the best way I can honestly make. I cannot guarantee that you'll find enjoyment out of them, especially when compared to the light novel, but for the sake of wanting to see what Toaru is all about before getting invested, this is the way I see it. However, I like to advise that once you finish either Railgun Season 2 or the Index movie, or Index Season 2, I recommend to skip Season 3 of Index and read the manga adaptation instead. Index Season 3, although I'm personally mixed with it, is the most controversial among fans. Season 1 was alright, Season 2 was okay. I personally like Season 1 more, but I can admit Season 2 was arguably much better. Season 3 was objectively a messy season overall. It's that hated, unfortunately. I mean, what would you expect? It's JC's staff, right? But it really has that much potential to improve from its mistakes of its predecessors, but it never did. The last thing I want to do is ruin the enjoyment for my audience, so if you want to get into Season 3 of Index, I strongly recommend reading the manga all the way through. But if you're still going to watch it anyway, hey, all the power to you. Just make sure you don't skip the Accelerator anime and Railgun T once you're done. Which then brings me to number 3. If you picked neither of the two and decided to read the manga instead, I think this is also okay. I can't necessarily say it's better than the first choice, but it's not exactly a bad one either. That's what I did when I didn't enjoy Season 3 of Index. The Toaru manga has skipped a few arcs from the light novel, but I think that shouldn't stop you from continuing reading either way, because although it is notorious for skipping arcs, it's still a definitive adaptation to the light novel, at least so far. Ultimately, however, in conclusion, from these 3 choices, the decision is all yours to make at the end of the day. I may be someone who tends to enjoy animations and even reading manga, but I don't have a problem with reading plain books myself. This includes the light novels. It is a good experience for me, and I do plan to get myself a copy one day. I think it's available in English and other languages. If you have any questions or concerns about this section, please be sure to send in your questions in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. I may not be the most expert, but I will do my best to make it right. Thank you again either way for getting into Toaru franchise. And finally, all of this wrapped into my final thoughts. Man, talking about Toaru again really brings me back in 2014 when I used to have a group of friends in the community talking about our favorite stuff in the franchise. And talking about it again for covering a series after revisiting some of the anime, the spin-off, manga adaptation, and even reading the light novels, yeah, Toaru is as good, if not greater, than I originally remembered, and I hope the newer audience would at least give it a shot. It made me happy to visit something that I've been a casual fan of from 10 years ago, and I thought what better way to celebrate its 20th birthday than to finally talk about it on my channel, and potentially interact with fellow fans who probably have been a fan longer than I've been. I've asked a lot of people what was their favorite aspect about the Toaru franchise as a whole, and I've gotten a few responses here and there, liking the concept of 2 worlds, being the world of science and the world of magic, and seeing them clash. People like Accelerator, which is reasonable, not to mention Tomo's entire character arc regarding his past memories, where he started to think who he was and how reality shattered his own fate, but despite all of it, he never stopped fighting for what he believed was right. and other memorable characters like Misaka, Kamisato, Itsuwa, Kenzaki, Kurokushirai, Oiharu, Kakine, and of course, the master Aleister himself. And honestly, so on and so forth. For me, my favorite part about Toaru is the characters' moments. Not just Toma's character moments, even just minor characters having a flashback of themselves, interacting with other people, getting to know about them and noticing their similarities and what also makes them the opposite to others. Not to mention the lore behind it and magic science behind it, and honest to God, the power systems of Index as a whole. Notice how I didn't go much into detail about the Toaru power system because, well, I pretty much explained in a nutshell that Toaru has two sides of faction. The magic side studies their beliefs with magical abilities they can cast, while the science side draws powers from real-life scientific facts, a power that we were given as a child as students, unlike the magic side that usually draws from real-life mythology and religion. I'm sure you get the ropes of it pretty quickly because I think it's pretty much explained how it works, making it an effective and consistent power system overall. It's right there for me with the Dying Will Flames of Katekyo Hitman Reborn and the Innocence from the Grey Man. At beyond its core, the Toaru franchise has come a long way, and I cannot wait for its upcoming future works and plans of what Kamachi has in mind for the series. This includes me also looking forward about the spin-offs as well, and honestly anything Toaru related. I'm sure most of us now have been waiting for the New Testament anime for so long now, and I'm one of them for sure. I haven't interacted much with the Toaru fanbase nowadays since my current close friends who are familiar with the series, and I think today has to be a change for that. If you're a Toaru fan watching this, thank you for making it this far. Rather, if you're new and you're interested in the franchise, I also want to thank you for reaching this far too. It's insane to me that I just recently discovered the growth fan base in this franchise ever since. I've been a solo fan pretty much ever since I wasn't able to contact my older peers who introduced me to the Toaru series as a whole in the first place. And seeing that still people love it and I occasionally watch other content creators of Toaru makes me rather happy. My love, and rather our love for the Toaru Majutsu no Index is something that not even science or magic can comprehend. And I'm at least glad that Kamachi is working hard to make this series come to light. That being said, take care, have a great day, and see you soon.